Another day, another disaster for Samsung, it would seem, as the company does its best Google impression with all of these missteps that we seem to be having. I'm going to address two things in this particular video. I'm going to talk about the interview that an executive vice president in Samsung's R&D department gave about why the Galaxy S24 series won't be getting some Galaxy AI functions. But I'm also going to address the One UI 7 delays because I do think they're linked. I wrote about this in Android Police on Friday. I linked that in the community section. But I think it's interesting, and you have to think about how Samsung releases information. This was I believe this was an Indonesian interview, or was translated. It was an executive vice president kind of going over why there would be limitations on Galaxy AI on older hardware. And think back, it wasn't that long ago that we had a similar situation with the Galaxy S22 Ultra getting Galaxy AI in the first place. How was that information released? How did we get that leak initially? It was a Samsung community post, I believe, on the Spanish site that had to be translated, and it was a developer that was a Samsung developer that was working with. Same situation. Why does Samsung trial and test balloon information like this? Because it's easily backtracked. It's not official from the company. It's a one-off interview. It's things like that. Samsung throws out information, sees what the initial reaction is, and then decides how to go from here. That's where we are with this interview that I saw. That's where we are with people now Samsung trying to come up with ideas on why they could gatekeep features for Galaxy AI on something like the S24 Ultra from just last year, which is absolutely ridiculous. And it absolutely ties in to the One UI 7 delays, because there's only two reasons why One UI 7 is being delayed. I wanted to give Samsung the benefit of the doubt. I wanted to think, hey, maybe they're working on stuff, but now I see One UI 7 stable on the Galaxy S25 series working fine. Little weird that it would be that difficult to port it back, especially since the beta has been running fine since December on my Galaxy S24 Ultra. No problems. Can't imagine there would be on $1,300 hardware from just last year. Yet we don't have One UI 7. And I was willing to give the company the benefit of the doubt until I hear that there's 3 more betas planned, and it looks like we're not going to get a stable release of One UI 7 on older hardware until at least April. Why? 2 reasons. Number 1, they want to sell more Galaxy S25s. I'm sorry. It's becoming harder and harder to think of other reasons why Samsung would possibly be delaying the software other than to gatekeep it from older hardware, because you'd be like, wait a minute, if I'm getting all this on this, why would I pay for the new stuff without any sort of significant hardware innovation on the Galaxy S25 Ultra? Why would I pony up the money? They're waiting for the pre-order periods to pass. They're waiting for the carrier deals to pass. And then when all that is done, 6 months or 3 or 4 months down the line, they can say, okay, I guess we could port it to the old hardware. It'll be fine. That's what we're looking at. And that absolutely, to me, is ridiculous. The other reason for the delay that I think, they're trial ballooning stuff like this. They're sending out stuff into the wild and seeing what sticks. What's the most realistic reason we could come up with for why a $1,300 phone running a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 from just last year can't get our latest and greatest technology features, or AI features, as we put it? Why could that possibly be? There's no reason for that. Don't talk to me about the personal data engine. Don't talk to me about all that. The Samsung executive actually specifically pointed out NowBrief. And friends, after having used NowBrief for a month now, I can tell you it does nothing. I think in the article I stated a Pentium 3 running at 500 megahertz could pull up a random news story and show me the weather. I don't need a Snapdragon 8 Elite for Galaxy to do that. Don't think it's a bridge too far. Samsung is trying to throw stuff at the wall, seeing what sticks for reasons why it could gatekeep the older hardware, because it knows at the end of the day, the second you get One UI 7 with Galaxy AI on your S24 Ultra, on your S23 Ultra, you have 0 reasons to upgrade. Also, Samsung, unfortunately, is kind of changing the way I look at smartphone sales now. If we're going to really have a situation where my year-old $1,300 hardware can't get your latest and greatest features for the next software update, which I'm going to wait on par 16 months now, it seems, why would I buy that in the first place? Why would I buy your flagship phones, period? I have no reason to. It's just going to cause me to spend the least amount of money possible The bare minimum. Because if we're going to change if we're going to move the goalposts, if we're going to render year-old expensive technology obsolete just to give us these new software features, then that's going to change the conversation. Because there's zero reason to recommend why people buy phones like this at that cost, because we don't use a fraction of the power. And the only reason why it was acceptable before, and it wasn't terrible value before, to spend extra money on power we don't need, is because it provided future-proofing. It provided peace of mind that 2-3 years down the line, you'd still be getting the flagship features. You'd still be getting the latest and greatest because you overpaid and you bought the best then. If that's going to change, if Samsung is going to artificially make it so that's not possible anymore, then there's zero reason to buy the flagships. Buy something else. Buy something else. And it's unfortunate because I don't think they're going to be alone. That people mention Apple all the time. Personally, if you're on the Android side, you don't care what Apple does. Apple's a disaster. Apple Intelligence is a mess. Yes, does Apple do stuff like this? Absolutely. But we don't want Samsung, one of our main alternatives, doing it as well, because then we're really stuck. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but when you look around in carrier stores like we talked about with OnePlus, there's not a lot going on there. You got Apple doing this, now you're going to have Samsung doing this. Pretty soon it's going to be Google doing this even more than they already do, and then we got nothing. And that's what I want to avoid. But it seems very unlikely that we're going to be able to avoid it. And someone left a comment not that long ago, just today, about how Samsung's setting it up to where we're renting phones. We're just leasing phones. $300 or $400 a year, leasing a phone, $30 a month, you're not going to care. You don't really care about the latest and greatest. You don't care about whether you're getting the features or not. Oh, it doesn't matter. I'll just trade this in. $30, okay, give me another one. And then, okay, now I got the features. That's cool. And because they don't feel that $1,300 or $1,400 coming out of their pocket. If they did, there'd be more outrage. This is it's feeling more and more like this is orchestrated. And I have to believe it is. Samsung's not stupid. This feels orchestrated. The whole thing is now getting to the point where it's becoming a little obvious that this is exactly how Samsung wanted to set it up. The marketing for the S24 Ultra, appealing to people on carrier upgrade cycles, not really offering a lot of innovation like a lot of the phones overseas because it doesn't really need to compete with them. Only needs to compete with what's in front of people's faces. Now you have this gatekeeping on the software side. And it is incredibly disappointing that this is where we're at, especially with Samsung. That for so long was the beacon of Android innovation for us, giving us the latest and greatest, porting over all that stuff, that technology from overseas that we were so excited about, and now we get nothing. And it's disappointing, it's a joke, and it really needs to be pushed back on. And I think it's possible, because if you remember last year, when the Galaxy S22 Ultra, that rumor came out, that blog post, when people started translating that Spanish post or whatever it was, I can't quite remember, but it was something like that. There was a tremendous backlash. I made videos about it. Everybody made videos about it. And what happened? We got Galaxy AI on the S22 Ultra. Now, this interview, Samsung seems to have learned from that mistake. They say, well, circular search and other stuff is easier to bring to all the hardware because we do a lot of that in the cloud. Now it's stuff that's on-device based, so it needs that 4 Galaxy, that extra power on the 4 Galaxy that somehow eludes my S23, my S24 Ultra. Okay, you could try that tack, but let me tell you something. I'm going to need more detailed information on why a $1,300 phone from a year ago with so much power that I never even used can't handle it. And if that's true, if it can't handle it, then that's a Samsung problem, not a me problem. I did my part. I spent my money on a big phone with massive specs to be able to handle your software the very next year. So if you can't engineer your stuff, if you can't figure out a way to service customers who spent that kind of money a year ago, you're the joke, not me. But so far, it only feels like the joke's on us. And I've had enough of it. And if you want to sit there and defend Samsung, if you're happy with it, oh, I got my phone for free. I got my S25 Ultra for pennies on the dollar. Good for you. You're part of the problem. It's up to people who want better to sit here and fight for it. Because the only way that we're going to get it is by creating enough of a backlash that Samsung says, all right, well, hold on. All right, we got to give them something. We got to give them something. We got to port this feature. We got to port this feature. We'll figure out a way to do it. There are ways to do things. Don't think for a second there aren't. Don't think for a second that a chipset like the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 can't handle another way of offloading stuff into the cloud, processing stuff on device if it takes a few seconds longer. It's the same amount of RAM, right? They didn't upgrade that. That's what I was told. That was the excuse Google tried to use a year ago. I didn't have the RAM. I didn't have the RAM. Sorry, we didn't fit it with the RAM, so it can't really. Nonsense. This has the same amount of RAM now. So what's your excuse? Oh, well, it's the 4 Galaxy bit of the Snapdragon 8 Elite. Yeah, that was it. Yeah, we work with Qualcomm to do all this special stuff. Special stuff I see on my Pixel, on my OnePlus 13. What's the reasoning for that? I was told that cross-app integration was because Samsung worked with Qualcomm and they came up all the... Well, I see it on other devices. So which one is it? Friends, the answer is always somewhere in between. And Samsung's at one end and we're at this end of the spectrum. And I promise you, there's a way to meet in the middle. We just have to make sure that these companies realize that and that we're here to fight for what we want in devices like this, because there will be never a reason, ever again, to spend this kind of money on a flagship if a year later you can't get every single feature that new phones are getting with software. If you've made it this far, like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Until next time, I'm going to take my blood pressure medication. Have a Steve-alicious day.